USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Game of the Week podcast from US College Hockey Online at USCHO.com. An in-depth look at this week's top college hockey matchup and a preview of the other big games.
Welcome to the USCHO Game of the Week podcast for Thursday, January 21st, 2021. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. Maybe this wouldn't have been on anybody's radar a few weeks ago, but our Game of the Week has two teams going in the right direction in the Big Ten. Notre Dame is hosting Michigan.
Joining us now to preview this week's Game of the Week for USCHO, it's Darin Pritchett, the radio voice of the Fighting Irish. In Notre Dame, Michigan, Darin, this is a game that maybe a couple of weeks ago wasn't the biggest on anybody's calendar, on people's mind, but coming off of the last weekend, even the last couple of weekends for both of these teams, Notre Dame, Michigan, they're playing good hockey right now. This should be a good two-game series this week.
Well, guys, first off, great to be with you. And this is always my favorite series of the year. When Notre Dame and Michigan gets together, I know it's an old saying, but you truly just throw out the records. They play so competitive. It is hard fought. It's never been a series that gets overly dirty or anything. It's just good, clean, solid hockey. And we went up to Ann Arbor when we didn't have a whole lot going on early in the year and swept them in a pair of one-goal games. So it's been a strange series from the standpoint the road team has won 6 consecutive games. We split last year and both won in the opposite building, and then we swept them up there. So I'm sure the old Wolverines are kind of tired of the Irish winning 5 straight in Ann Arbor and probably want to do some damage this weekend.
Well, you go back to that early season series. What did you see from Michigan, and what did you maybe even see from Notre Dame that made them successful? But what maybe some of the challenges that Michigan posed and what Notre Dame does or did well that weekend?
Well, I'll say this first off, from a Notre Dame standpoint, it was early in the year, so we were still trying to figure things out. But I know something that Coach Jackson had really stressed with his team. They just needed to do a better job of getting out of their own zone cleanly. In the previous series against Wisconsin, I mean, we had turnover after turnover. So against a transition team like Michigan, you just can't be sloppy with the puck in your defensive zone. And I remember we did a really outstanding job of taking care of the puck in that series. We got really good goaltending. It's been a little up and down so far this year, but in that particular series, Ryan Bissell was outstanding. And I think something series at that time, those Michigan freshmen were coming off a really outstanding series, and Johnson, Bordelot, Beniers, Brisson, they didn't have any points in that series against the Fighting Irish. So we did a really good job of shutting down those top freshmen who had dominated early on in the year. And that's with them having the last change. So we can even line up a little maybe better the way we want to in the series here in South Bend since we get the final change. But, you know, those freshmen were flying high at that time, and we did a really good job of making them play defense. I think we made them play a full ice game, and that was one of the factors in those 2 wins at Yost Ice Arena.
Darin, we had a chance, Ed and I did earlier this week, to talk to Coach Jackson, and one of the questions we never got to ask him was about Landon Slaggert and coming back from World Juniors. And watching him last weekend, he really seemed to be an impact player. And then you have his brother Graham playing with him. I love the chemistry they have. Can you maybe just, give your thoughts on what World Juniors can do for a player in terms of maybe improving their play on the ice when they get back to their team, and then also the chemistry that Landon and Graham Slaggert have together?
First, let's talk about the chemistry. What's really interesting is, guys, since they're separated by a couple of years, they've never really played together before. Now, they've practiced or they've had mini sticks battles in the basement in their house, but in terms of a competitive situation, this is actually really new to them, and they have shown really amazing chemistry so far. Graham has done a great job moving from wing to center this year, and Landon just plays a really hard game, physical. I know a guy he really looks up to is former Notre Dame forward Andrew Slade, now with the Islanders, and you can see a little bit of Andrew's game in Landon's game just because he plays that heavy style of game, very, very talented. So those two with Alex Steves have formed a really productive line. so far this year. So that's a really exciting development right now for Coach Jackson. And it's funny you mentioned about the World Juniors. When I asked Coach about Landon going to the World Juniors and what he might get out of it, he referenced, sometimes it's good for a player and sometimes it can be a negative for a player. I think in Landon's case, it did give him a little extra boost of confidence when you go up against that Canadian team with all those great draft picks and you come out ahead and play really good hockey and walk away with a gold medal. I think it did a lot for Landon. And boy, he came out the first game back and scored 2 goals against Arizona State. So yeah, I think it is something that's going to be big for Landon. He was asked to do a particular role on that Team USA team, and he was more than happy to do it. And now he's back. And I'll tell you what, it's pretty exciting to see these slaggards who we've watched here in South Bend grow up in front of our eyes with their dad, being an associate head coach on this team. So we remember when they were little guys skating around. It's extra fun seeing them play with Notre Dame and having a big impact on this year's team.
In the past, it's been more typical for Notre Dame to really concentrate on one goaltender. The sophomore Ryan Bischel and the senior Dylan St. Cyr have split time. Their numbers, their statistics are almost identical. Jeff Jackson mentioned that really neither one has cemented himself as the go-to guy. What have you seen from these two goaltenders?
Well, I know Jeff in the past, if he sees a guy start to show some really good things and the team starts winning, he will stick with them. And I can remember back the year we went to the national championship game in 18, early on in the year, it was Cale Morris and Dylan St. Cyr just kind of taking turns. And then we played a horrible game in front of Dylan. It really was not his fault. And Cale came back the next night, had a great performance, and he never gave the job back. And that's really not happened so far this year. I'm not a goaltender expert, guys, but just from a broadcaster standpoint, it's just felt like you have a good performance and then there's a bit of a step back. Then you take 2 steps forward, then you go back again. Now, Ryan played both games at Michigan and he played tremendous. And then the next series was a little more uneven, which opened the door for Dylan to come back in. I think just based on what coaches talked about, I think each guy has given up some goals that you really need stopped. And until those goals stop going in, I think there might be a situation we see both goaltenders. But I got to be honest, I thought last weekend, after Bischel played so well in the first game, he'd come back with Ryan again, but he went with St. Cyr, and that turned out to be the right call because he had a tremendous night the next night. So save percentages right around 900. Obviously, you're looking for a whole lot more than that, but it's not been all their fault, first of all. But I'm really surprised one guy hasn't stepped forward at this point. And after what we saw last weekend at Minnesota, I wouldn't be shocked if we don't see both guys this weekend against Michigan.
Jeff Jackson noted that the team is 5-1 when he's got a full roster, and there have been little nibbles here and there with guys out of the lineup. How dramatic is the difference between a fully healthy Notre Dame and a short bench?
Well, we missed Nate Klerman, our captain defenseman, a couple of games, and that's a huge, huge loss. It was great to have him back last week. And so he just settles things down defensively, plays a tremendous game with Spencer Stasny, and he's got a little offense to his game. So, yeah, not having him, that's an important piece not to have in the lineup. And, yeah, it's been just kind of here and there. We've been missing guys. We lost Colin Tyson for a game last weekend due to a suspension. I actually hadn't looked at it the way Jeff looked at it, that we're 5-1 when we are at full strength. So I got to admit that caught me off guard. I haven't looked at the team in that particular capacity. I just know we've got to improve a lot defensively. And last weekend hopefully was a step in the right direction. And this defense will be challenged this weekend. And offensively, Jeff has wanted to get up to the 3-goal mark. And we've been under that the last couple of years. And the power play until last weekend was 0 for their last 18. And they scored 2 against Minnesota. So in order to get to that 3-goal mark that he believes is the key for his team, the power play is going to have to be a little more productive. But yeah, that's interesting. I had not looked at it that way, that we're 5-1, we're at full strength. So you know what? I'm going to rely on the coach that's going to be in many Hall of Fames down the line, that he knows what he's talking about.
One of the great buildings in college hockey is Compton Family Ice Arena. Terrific energy, the fans, the band. What has it been like in the building with nobody there?
It's like watching a pickup game. It's just the strangest thing. I know from my broadcast booth, I have a piece of plexiglass in front of me, which is just very, very strange to protect other people down below in the press box. But not hearing the actual live fight song, the one that's played over the PA system, it's okay, but it just doesn't have the same feel. We've always had a really good student section, especially in the second half. Once football ends, the student section really picks up. And anytime we play teams like Boston College or Michigan, I mean, the place is just so electric. So that's what's so disappointing about this weekend, knowing what the excitement level would be in that building, and with the low roof, the way Jeff designed it, the place rocks, and just not to have any fans in there, it's just so, it's unthinkable almost. So I hope we get back to something very, very soon. I know we have to be careful and do all the right things, but this is one of those series you truly miss that electricity in the building. And as someone that roots for the Bruins and the NHL, I saw Brad Marchand made the comment, he doesn't know if there's going to be that many come from behind wins in the NHL this year, just because you don't have those momentum swings with the home team not having that crowd to pick them up. We're 3-6-1 at home this year, guys. It's the strangest thing. We're 4-0 on the road, and all 4 wins against the team that was ranked in the top 3 at the time of the games. But at home, we've just not had the juice for whatever reason, and 3-6-1 in that building, of course, is not going to get it done. We've had great success taking care of business at home since we went to the Compton, but this year it's been a totally different situation. And as you guys have probably heard from all the players and coaches, you have to create your own energy, and starting off games a little better would really help the Irish in turning around that record.
As a broadcaster, I got to ask you one inside baseball question. In the Big Ten this year, you have not been able to go on the road. You've had to call games via video. What are the challenges there?
Well, you're at the mercy of the camera person, first of all, and you're at the mercy of your internet speed that it's going to be okay to get you through the game. I actually had a moment earlier this year in a game in which I didn't realize my computer got unhooked from its electric adapter. So I'm calling the game with 4 minutes to go. It's a tie game, and my screen goes blank. And I'm thinking, uh-oh, what am I going to do now? Well, it took me like 20 seconds, and I'm stalling basically on the air. I realized the power source went out, so I had to plug it back into my computer, reboot the computer, click on the link, go through the password, and get it back on the screen. So that took probably 90 seconds to 2 minutes. I get the feedback, and at that point, it's still fuzzy. It's still recalibrating almost, so I can see players, but I can't see the number. It finally clears up. 15 seconds later, Nick Lieberman scores with 5.4 seconds left to beat Arizona State by 1 goal. So I'm my own engineer. I have to call the game. It can be challenging at times. I know Minnesota wore these white sweaters with gold numbers. They just did not show up on TV. So it was really a challenge last weekend against Minnesota. I know we got to do the best we can, and I know the people are doing their best in the buildings trying to give us these feeds so we can call the games as best as we can. And Michigan's feed was amazing, by the way, earlier this year. But you have to be prepared for anything, and having to reboot the computer and go through the link and the password and waiting for all that to happen, that was not something I don't think I ever thought I would have happen. And going back to my college days, learning to be a radio broadcaster, they never told me I was going to have to go through that. So I had no idea how to make it all work. But, you know, I got the feed up just in time to call the game-winning goal. So I guess at the end of the day, it all worked out.
Well, it is a crazy year. The good news, Michigan coming to Compton Family Ice Arena this week. The series actually starts tonight. It's the Thursday-Friday series, 6:30 local time on both of those games. If you have the TV broadcast, it'll be on NBC Sports Chicago and some of their affiliates. Then tomorrow, actually on NBC Sports National. But if you're not around a TV, the person to listen to, it's Darin Pritchett, the voice of the Irish. You can get that locally, obviously in South Bend, but you can find that link all over the web as well. Darin, we love catching up with you. It's always good to talk hockey. And so thanks so much for your time, and try to enjoy the rest of the season. Hopefully there's a lot of wins that make it more enjoyable, and hopefully a lot less technical glitches as well.
Well, guys, thanks for the invitation. Always a pleasure, and miss our times going up to all the teams in Hockey East. We had a lot of fun for 4 years competing in that particular conference, and we hope everybody's doing well up there, and hopefully we'll see all you guys hopefully down the road in the NCAA tournament, if not this year, maybe next year.
More of the Game of the Week podcast coming up.
This is the USCHO Game of the Week podcast from US College Hockey Online.
This is the Game of the Week podcast from USCHO. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. Jim, earlier in the week, we had a chance to talk to Notre Dame head coach Jeff Jackson, and then we got the picture maybe even filled in more talking with Darin Pritchett for this podcast. We've been looking at this game and talking about it off air, and I think you zeroed in on one of the key things about this matchup this weekend. Notre Dame can't be in a position where they have to play from behind.
No, I don't want to say that that's always been their calling card. I just feel like that's a team that, going back to seeing them a lot more when they were in Hockey East, you get them behind a couple of goals and they were usually done for. They weren't a team that rallied from multi-goal deficits. Maybe if you got a 1-goal game and you got, midway through the third, they pop one and then suddenly, they're in it, can do anything in overtime. But I do feel like this is a team that does need to play from ahead. And you even heard Darin mention that it would be good to get a lead at home where you don't have the ability to kind of generate the momentum of your fans and all of that sort of stuff this year. So I do feel like this is a game. If you're Jeff Jackson, you'd like to see your team jump out to a lead, maybe a 1-goal. It would be great to have a 2-goal lead in the first minute or even the first period or the first half of the game. But you've got to play the game as it comes at you, and that's the whole thing. You don't want to chase a game, but if you do, you've got to start finding ways to win them, because I think the postseason is usually about teams that are able to come back when things don't start the way that they want them to. So, when I look at some of the success that Jeff Jackson and the Irish have had, some of their NCAA tournament games over the year, that they have found ways to rally. So I think that it's not the greatest calling card to be a team that only is a front runner. But I understand what Jeff Jackson knows where his team's limitations are. Offense is not strong right now. He's got to find a way to make sure that their team stays out in front and does not chase the game.
Particularly because Mel Pearson's Wolverines this season have put up huge numbers. They can score goals in buckets.
Well, that's another part of it too, is that we heard Jeff Jackson say back on Tuesday when we talked to him on the Spotlight podcast, and then Darin mentioned it again. They haven't had the consistency in net at this point. So if you have a bad goal beat your goaltender, you know that you probably can't give up 3 goals in any of these games, because you're not out there scoring 4, 5, or 6 a game, whereas Michigan is. So it's definitely going to be a bit of a battle, and I do think that Notre Dame knows the type of game they have to get into. A track meet, which Michigan tends to play very well, that's not going to suit them well at all.
Well, when we look at the rest of the Big Ten, there are some interesting games. After losing 3 of their last 4, Minnesota is going to have a pair against Arizona State. These are huge games for both teams. Arizona State needs to improve on just 5 wins, and Minnesota needs to turn things around a bit.
Yeah, if you're Bob Motzko, you're sitting there saying, "Oh, we could use a team that's maybe a little overconfident." Well, that's not Arizona State. If anything, Arizona State should come into this series very hungry. They're trying to get wins. They know that losses and ties at this point in the season are not going to get them into an NCAA tournament position. They are, they're wedded to an at-large bid, and they're going to have to pretty much, play 800 ball on the way out, at least, to be considered. But you're Minnesota, you really have to right the ship. And last weekend, maybe you didn't play bad hockey, but you didn't get the goals when you needed them. And when you've lost 3 out of 4 coming in, this is one of those games that you kind of have to circle and say, we got to have the effort tonight, boys, and that's what Minnesota's going for.
Another key matchup in this is number 12 Wisconsin at Penn State. The Badgers, now that they seem to have a full roster, seem to have turned the corner a bit and are probably one of the most dangerous, maybe the second most dangerous team in Big Ten.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, if Minnesota does not turn things around, then Wisconsin starts becoming the number, that number 2 that could move to the number 1 spot. They're not that far out of first place at this point. And one weekend can put them into a position that they could be battling for first place. So Wisconsin, consistent, playing better hockey. I do think that having the full roster and having guys like Dylan Holloway back in the lineup helps them. Not to mention the other guys, but Holloway has been missing pretty much this entire season because of the Canadian World Junior Camp. But I think that, you've got to strike when the iron's hot. And if you're playing well, you've got to find a way to maintain that momentum. And I think that's what Coach Granato is probably looking for right now.
Earlier this season, when we had a chance to talk to Quinnipiac head coach Rand Pecknold, he was kind of high on the idea of playing the same team multiple times. Clarkson and Quinnipiac have already played 3 times. They're going to have 3 in a row up north at Yost Ice Arena this weekend. It's number 10 Quinnipiac at number 14 Clarkson.
Yeah, and these guys played it. So we don't have to go back that far. I think it's only 3 weeks ago they played a 3-game series down in Hamden, and Clarkson won the first game of that. Then let slip the second game, lost the third game, and since then really have not been the most consistent team, and they've slowly slipped in the rankings. I think Clarkson, I think a lot of people thought of would be the team of the 4 that are still playing in the ECAC that would maybe be the dominant team this season. So they are trying to right the ship. They're on home ice. Not that I think that matters a ton right now, but it is a long trip for Quinnipiac, and then to have to get off a bus and then play 3 games in 3 nights, that's kind of difficult knowing that you have, 8+ hours on the way home. So big weekend for both teams, but I think Clarkson, you're trying to get the ship sailing back in the right direction. This one kind of sticks out to me as a really big weekend for Clarkson.
When we turn to Hockey East, the schedule is being set week by week, which seems to be the right way to go about it, knowing that anything can come up at any time. And among this week's games, the one that really stands out is a home-and-home series, number 18 Providence at number 8 UMass. Providence maybe underperforming a little bit so far this season, I think, and UMass coming off a couple of mild upsets to Boston University.
Yeah, both of these teams have to be hungry right now. Each team has lost to Boston University in the last 2 weeks. UMass losing twice. Providence, I think, has a lot of talent. Inconsistency is an issue for them. UMass, I think, just against BU, they got into some penalty trouble, and their discipline wasn't as strong as it usually is. So I think that this is one of those weekends that you almost want, if you're UMass, to bounce back with a good opponent, to prove to yourselves that you can win these games. But at the same time, you don't want to drop 4 in a row. UMass was rolling. I mean, this was a team that really was driving the bus in the right direction. So big weekend for both these teams, but UMass, you're trying to get that train back on tracks.
In the NCHC, a full slate of games and one matchup that really stands out. Let's take a look at what's going on in that conference. Miami's going to be at number 6 St. Cloud. Western Michigan at number 7 Minnesota Duluth. Western Michigan playing pretty well after a sweep of St. Cloud. Colorado College has a pair at North Dakota. And the 2 ranked teams that are matching up are number 19 Denver at number 11 Omaha. Omaha is hot, and Denver needs to continue to move in the direction they have in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, Denver, nice win last Sunday against North Dakota. Then they kind of felt the wrath the next night when North Dakota played a much better game and got the victory, a handy victory on Monday night. But then I look at Omaha. They haven't played a lot. They had a little bit of a COVID issue and missed, I believe, 2 solid weekends, 2 full weekends. Got back to things this past Monday and Tuesday, where they headed out to Colorado and got a sweep there. But for Omaha, I look at their schedule, and I know that there are no easy games in the NCHC. But if you're looking at the 3 opponents that in concept are below them, Miami, Colorado College, and Western Michigan, those 3 opponents are in their rear view mirror, aside from 2 more games with Colorado College. But everything that's ahead of them, take those 2 Colorado College games, are nationally ranked opponents. They have to play North Dakota 6 times in the last 5 weeks of the season. Am I counting that right? Yes, 5 weeks of the season. They will play North Dakota 6 times. 4 times they'll play Denver, and then you'll throw in Colorado College for 2 more games. That is a crazy schedule that is left for this Omaha team. So starting this weekend, their true test is in front of them. They're 5-0-1 in their last 6, but only 2 of those opponents were nationally ranked. This is where we're going to really see the mettle that Omaha has in them.
And it was a great weekend last weekend for Western Michigan, as I mentioned, with the sweep at St. Cloud State. Boy, if they could pull off even a split this weekend at Minnesota Duluth, you'd have to really like things for the Broncos.
Maybe, they're heading back in the right direction. Don't forget, this team was in real bad shape early in the season. But if they can get things going and heading back in the right direction, you have to believe that they have a good future ahead of them. They had some injuries, I believe, early in the season. They've gotten some players back, and now if you can keep putting these wins together, 3-0-1 in their last 4 games, including that sweep you mentioned against St. Cloud State, could be. You never know. I had started to write off Western Michigan back in early December. I think I might be able to say some more positive things about them because I think they are a better club than they've performed to date.
Well, there's a whole bunch of hockey on national networks and on regional sports networks, not to mention streaming services. Catch it while you can. I know you can't go to the arena, but there's a lot of great hockey to be had. For Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll catch you next time.
This has been the USCHO Game of the Week podcast, a production of U.S. College Hockey Online. Visit uscho.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.